On Thursday, February 13th, 1992, just after 9 in the morning, a woman walks into a gas station outside Norfolk, Virginia, and sets a clipboard on the counter. She does not buy gum. She does not buy gas. She slides over a stack of printed slips and a cashier's check for $10,000 and asks the clerk to run every line. The terminal starts printing. It does not stop. Across the state, from Richmond to Roanoke, 34 other people are doing the same thing at the same hour. Same clipboards, same checks, same machines, running hot. In 72 hours, they will buy more than 6 million lottery tickets. The man who ordered all of it is asleep on the other side of the planet, in a house in Melbourne. He has never bought a lottery ticket. He thinks the lottery is a tax on people who cannot do arithmetic. By Saturday night, he will be $27 million richer, and 14 government agencies will spend 4 years trying to prove he cheated. They will fail because he did not. This is the story of Stefan Mandel, a Romanian economist who decided, at a kitchen table in communist Bucharest, that he would beat the lottery not by guessing, but by buying it. We are going to follow him out of a country that did not let anyone leave, through Israel, through Western Europe, into Australia, and finally into a leased office in Norfolk, Virginia. We are going to walk through the syndicate he built, the warehouses, the printers, the couriers, the shell companies, and the single line of mathematics underneath all of it that has been printed in textbooks for 100 years. Every actuary knows that line. Every casino owner knows it. Mandel was the only one who ever did the insane thing of acting on it at full scale. The question is not whether the math worked. The math always worked. The question is how one clerk on a few dollars a week built the machine that the math required, and why the people who run lotteries never believed anyone would. Stefan Mandel was born in Romania in 1934 into a Jewish family, and he survived the war as a child the way thousands did and thousands didn't. Quietly, in hiding. His first language was numbers. By 1965, he was 31 years old, married, 2 children, a small apartment in Bucharest, and a job as an economist at a state-owned mining company. The work was cost analysis and payroll, and statistical reports nobody read. His salary was 360 lei a month, in the West, the price of a decent pair of shoes. And Romania was closed. Nicolae Ceausescu had taken power the year before and was tightening every door, passports, currency, exit visas. The secret police listened to the phones and read the letters. If you wanted to leave, you needed money, real money. The kind a border clerk could not refuse. Mandel was never going to have it, not on 360 lei a month. So he sat at the kitchen table at night after the children were asleep, with a notebook and a pencil, and the state radio playing. He was not reading economics. He was reading probability, Pascal, Fermat, Bernoulli, the actuarial tables that insurance companies and casinos use to move money, predictably, from people who guess to people who calculate. He described himself, years later, in one sentence: a weekend mathematician, an accountant without much education. But mathematics, properly applied, can guarantee a fortune. Properly applied. That phrase did all the work. Because Mandel had noticed something about the national lottery that any economist could have seen, and none of them ever bothered to. Here is what a lottery actually is. It is a tax. A small one paid voluntarily mostly by people who can least afford it. You pick 6 numbers from a pool. The combinations run into the millions. Your ticket costs $1. The state keeps about half of every dollar. And on a normal week, the money you are likely to get back is worth less than the money you put in. You lose. The state wins. That is the entire business. But sometimes nobody wins, and the jackpot rolls over. Once, twice, 5 times. The pot grows. And here is the thing almost nobody stops to notice. When the jackpot grows large enough, the math turns inside out. If the prize is bigger than the cost of buying every possible combination, then buying every combination stops being gambling. It becomes purchasing. You are not betting. You are paying a fixed price for a larger fixed return. Buy them all. Win them all. The profit is arithmetic. This was not Mandel's discovery. The foundations were laid in France in 1654, in letters between Pascal and Fermat about how to divide the stakes in an interrupted game of chance. 300 years later, the same equation sits inside every casino, every pension fund, every insurance company on Earth. So why had nobody ever beaten a lottery with it? Because the gap between knowing and doing was enormous. To buy every combination, you needed millions in cash, the ability to print millions of unique slips, and the logistics to feed them through thousands of machines before the draw. You needed a corporation. The lottery had been designed by people who understood the math perfectly. They simply assumed that no one would ever be insane enough or organized enough to try. They had never met a Romanian clerk with a pencil and nothing left to lose. Mandel did not have the cash to buy every combination. He had 360 lei a month. So he asked a smaller question. What if you didn't need every ticket, only a carefully chosen few hundred that guaranteed not the jackpot, but the second prize, with the same certainty and a fraction of the money? He called the method combinatorial condensation. He worked on it for years. Notebooks filled, discarded, filled again. He never published it. When a journalist asked him for the formula decades later, he said it would be like Coca-Cola handing over the recipe. In a standard 6 from 49 lottery, covering all the 5-number outcomes would take more than 5,000 combinations. Mandel's algorithm pulled that down to 569. Buy those 569 lines, and if the winning numbers fell inside his chosen base of 15, he was guaranteed at least a second prize, plus hundreds of smaller wins, plus a live shot at the jackpot itself. A 10-fold cut in capital, the same statistical guarantee. In March 1965, he found a partner, a friend with savings willing to bet on his neighbor's arithmetic. 80-20, the friend's money against Mandel's formula. They marked 569 combinations by hand, by pencil, in the dim light of a Bucharest apartment. Then the draw came. They did not hit the second prize. They hit the jackpot. First prize, first attempt. Enough money in a single night to equal years of an ordinary wage. Mandel spent it on one thing. He bribed a man in the foreign ministry. Documents appeared. Stamps appeared. An exit visa appeared. In a country where nobody left, Mandel left, with his wife, his 2 children, and a small leather suitcase holding 4 notebooks of calculations. The formula had already done the most important thing it would ever do. It had bought him out of Romania. First, Israel, where he studied mathematics formally for the first time, sitting in lecture halls, 30 years older than the students beside him. Then Western Europe, Italy, Germany, and England, testing variations on smaller lotteries and learning how each state ran its draws. Then, in the early 1970s, Mandel landed in Sydney with the suitcase, the family, and a conviction that the method could be scaled, not once, industrially. Australia in the 1970s was the perfect laboratory. Several state lotteries were running in parallel, each with its own rules, its own jackpots, and small, slow regulators. Mandel registered a syndicate and called it the International Lotto Fund. Investors put in capital, and he handled the math, the printing, the logistics, and the lawyers. When a jackpot anywhere in the country crossed his threshold, the syndicate moved. And now he was no longer condensing. He had the capital to do the unthinkable, to buy every single combination. Warehouses, laser printers, couriers, a shell company to move the cash, a trust to hold the investors, a team that could mobilize inside 72 hours. The wins started, and they did not stop. By 1986, the syndicate had taken its first seven-figure Australian jackpot. By the end of the decade, 12 Australian lotteries had paid out, plus hundreds of thousands of smaller prizes scattered across the millions of tickets that did not hit the top. The commission sent investigators, auditors, government accountants. They could not say he was cheating because he was not. He was buying tickets at the same counter as everyone else, only all of them. Mathematics, properly applied. The math did the rest, so Australia changed the law. A new rule, written specifically for Mandel, said no single buyer or syndicate could purchase every combination of a draw. 15 years of warehouses and printers and lawyers were overnight illegal at home. Mandel did not retire. He bought a plane ticket and went looking for the same conditions somewhere else. And then he found Virginia. Most American lotteries were too big, tens of millions of combinations, beyond his threshold, even for a syndicate. Mandel read the rulebooks like a man reading tide charts. He needed a draw small enough that every combination was buyable, and a jackpot large enough that the rollover crossed his line. Virginia drew 6 numbers from 1 to 44. Total combinations, 7,059,052, less than half the size of an Australian draw. Buyable. So he began, before the jackpot was even big enough, in a warehouse in Melbourne. 16 full-time employees, banks of computers generating combinations, laser printers feeding paper into boxes around the clock, day shift and night shift, for 3 months, printing every one of the 7 million unique tickets needed to cover the entire Virginia draw. Then he waited for the jackpot to roll. On Wednesday, February 12th, 1992, it crossed his threshold, $27 million. Mandel had 72 hours. The plan had been ready for months. It went live with a single phone call. In Melbourne, the warehouse went hot. 7 million pre-printed slips were boxed for shipment, roughly a ton of paper, and air freighted to a leased office in Norfolk. 35 couriers were already on staggered flights from Melbourne and Sydney and Auckland. Most of them were certified accountants, chosen deliberately, people who could carry large sums through an airport without flinching, who would not panic at a customs question. On the ground, one person ran the entire operation. Her name was Anithalie Alex. She had a list of more than 100 Virginia retailers, each with a high-volume terminal, each matched to a courier with a stack of $10,000 cashier's checks and an assigned pile of slips. The instructions were simple: walk to the counter, hand over the slips, hand over the check, wait for the print, box it, drive to the next one. By Friday, with a day and a half to the draw, a complication. One of the largest grocery chains in the state refused to keep processing. Their machines could not keep up. They cited policy. They cited store hours. 700,000 combinations went suddenly uncovered. Mandel, watching from Australia by fax, did not stop. He redirected couriers, recalculated coverage on the fly, and pushed the remaining stores harder. Think about what it took to stand at that counter. You are an accountant. You have not slept in a day and a half. The clerk is staring at you, and the manager has come out from the back to watch. And behind you, a line of people who just wanted a lottery ticket are wondering what exactly is happening. In your hand is a cashier's check worth more than the clerk earns in a year. And the only honest answer to the question on everyone's face, "What are you doing?" is one you cannot give. You are not allowed to explain that a man in Melbourne has calculated that this is not gambling. You just slide over the next stack and wait for the machine to catch up. The checks piled up at the registers. The boxes of printed tickets piled up in rented vans. By Saturday afternoon, they had physically purchased about 6,400,000 of the 7 million combinations. Coverage, 99.3%. A gap of 0.6%, where the winning numbers might fall, and the whole operation would walk away with nothing. It was the only part of the plan that arithmetic could not guarantee. At 11:20 on the night of Saturday, February 15, 1992, the Virginia Lottery drew its numbers. 8, 11, 13, 15, 19, 20, 6 numbers. In a leased office in Norfolk, somewhere in the ton of paper that had crossed an ocean, was a single slip with those 6 numbers printed on it. Mandel had bought it. He had bought it along with 6 million others, from a desk in Melbourne, in a draw he would never watch, in a country he had flown couriers out of 2 days earlier. This was the formula at full scale, mathematics, properly applied, and nothing else. The jackpot was $27,036,142. Underneath it, the secondary prizes the math had promised, 6 second prizes, more than 100 third prizes, and 135,000 smaller payouts scattered across the millions of tickets that did not hit the top 6. Another $900,000. The total cost of the operation, printing, shipping, couriers, tickets, lawyers, was around $5.5 million. A Romanian clerk who had never bought a lottery ticket, working from a desk on the other side of the world, had just executed the largest single syndicate lottery win ever recorded. And then Virginia decided not to pay him. The lottery officials were certain it was fraud. They simply could not name it. They stalled. They searched the rule book for a reason to withhold the money. And while they searched, the bigger machine moved in. 14 agencies, 3 countries, 4 years. The FBI, the CIA, the IRS, the Australian Securities Commission, and a dozen more. They examined every ticket, every cashier's check, every investor, every courier, every store owner who had run a slip through a terminal. They were looking for the bribe, the insider, the rigged draw, the crime. There was not one. They found a man who had read a textbook and built the infrastructure that the textbook implied, because buying every combination of a public lottery was, and is, completely legal. The Virginia lottery had simply never believed that anyone would actually do it. Mandel's own description of the standoff was not gracious. He was not, he said, the kind of person who lays down and dies because some glorified clerk does not understand the math. In the end, both governments did the only thing left to do. The man had broken no law, so they wrote new ones, rules to make sure no one could ever do it again. The system, unable to call him a criminal, rewrote itself around the shape of the one man who had beaten it. His associate Anithali Alex put it more simply. "You could not," she said, "have written a script as good as this." One time, real life was better than fiction. After Virginia, it came apart. The later ventures collapsed. By 1995, Mandel was bankrupt. There was a conviction in Israel over a financial disclosure charge, a 10-month sentence, and years of appeals that ran in both directions. The man who could guarantee a jackpot could not, it turned out, guarantee anything else. Today, he is in his 90s. He lives in a beach house in Vanuatu, a small island in the South Pacific, about as far from a Bucharest kitchen table as a man can get. He does not play the lottery. He never did. That is the part that stays with you. Not the 27 million, not the ton of paper, or the 35 couriers, or the 14 agencies. It is that the most successful lottery player who ever lived thought the lottery was contempt dressed up as hope, a tax on people who couldn't do the arithmetic. He never once stood at a counter and picked a number and prayed. He found the one week the numbers stopped being a prayer and started being a price, and he paid it. Everyone had the formula. It was in the textbooks. The casinos had it, the actuaries had it, the people who designed the lottery had it. Only one man was patient enough and ruthless enough to act on it, and when he did, the law itself had to change to stop him. When journalists ask him how a Romanian accountant on a few dollars a week pulled 27 million out of Virginia in 72 hours, he gives them the same answer every time. The same answer from the kitchen table in 1965. Mathematics, properly applied, can guarantee a fortune. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the ones where the rules were never broken, only read more carefully than anyone expected, subscribe, and we will keep finding them.